Hello everyone, thanks so much for stopping by. Today I'm doing part 2 of the My Monthly Hero May 2018 card kit. And so we're going to jump in with card number 6. I'm grabbing a piece of the hot pressed watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to take one of my infinity dies here. So these are the rounded corner infinity dies from Hero Arts. And I'm going to cut out a panel. Just gonna run that through my die cut machine. Okay, now next I wanted to use this beautiful stencil, and so I'm going to place it where I want it on top, and I'll flip it over, and just using some painter's tape I'm going to secure it to the back of my cardstock here. Once we have that done, I'm going to go over the top of it with my Versamark ink pad very carefully, because it does lift up a little bit. But after it's inked up, I'm just going to remove my stencil, and then I'm going to carefully remove the tape, and then I'm going to go over the top of this with some clear embossing powder. And when I did this, I should have used my anti-static powder tool, because there's a lot of little, you can't hardly tell here, but there's a lot of little flakes that are around my swirls on my tree. But it kind of looked really neat, so I thought, well, I'm just going to roll with it and see how this turns out. So I'm just going to go ahead and melt that, and still you can't see it, but I'm going to go over the top of this entire panel with some Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. And when I'm done going over the entire panel, you'll be able to see all the little dots and specks that are around my swirls. So it kind of looked really neat. After I got that done, I'm going to take a baby wipe, and going at a diagonal swooshing, I'm going to go over the top of my tree, and it creates a really neat like wood grain effect, and I really like the way that turned out. But there you could really see those little the clear embossing powder specks. But I thought it kind of really added something to the background. Okay, I went over the edges with some more of my Distress Oxide ink. It was, again, Vintage Photo. And then in the stamp set, there are these two really itty-bitty leaves, and I wanted to accent my little tree with some black leaves. So I'm going to go around with the two different types of leaves and just fill in my tree. Okay, now for the sentiment for this card, I chose Thinking of You, and I'm going to stamp that towards the bottom left here. Just again using my VersaFine ink. Now, once we have this done, I thought it'd be fun to add a little bit of texture, because so far it's just a one-layer card. So I'm going to take my stencil again, and it still has my Versamark on there, so carefully I'm placing it on top, and then I'll flip it over and add some more painter's tape to secure it down to my panel. And then I have some Nouveau glimmer paste. This is Moonstone. It's such a pretty iridescent glitter paste, and I'm going to go over my stencil. I'm just going over the embossed area of the tree just to give this a little bit of dimension. The Moonstone glimmer paste has some gold hues to it, and I think it looks really, really pretty against that distressed background. Okay, now I'm going to just carefully fill in all my stencil and then carefully lift it up. And you really can't see the detail in there, but it is so pretty. Very, very elegant, I think. Now I'm just going to set this. I'm going to take my spatula here and go around the edges, because the glimmer paste had excess hanging over. But we're going to set that aside to dry. And the glimmer paste actually takes doesn't take very long to dry, so it took probably about 10 minutes to dry. But there we have it. Now I'm going to flip this panel over, and then I'll add some foam tape behind it. And then this is going to go on an A2 size card base. Okay, now we're just for bells and whistles. I am going to go over my image with a few of my iridescent sequins here. And it's almost the one layer card, but I think the outcome turned out very pretty. And it also could be a sympathy card too. I think it has the elegance for that. But that's card number 6. Okay, now we're going to move along to card number 7. I wanted to use this beautiful frame die, and so I'm placing it on a piece of white cardstock. And then I'm also going to take the largest stitched rectangle die that I have, and I'm going to cut out a panel here. Okay, now I don't want the swing on here, so I'm just going to take my scissors and just trim off that swing. Lovely. Okay, now for my background. Oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do a little stamping. I like the little silhouette of the boy on a bike. And so I'm going to use some VersaFine ink and stamp that image on a piece of white cardstock. And then I'm also going to, while I'm at it, going to stamp my sentiment. The sentiment says happy thoughts. Now the little bike does have a coordinating die, so I'll just cut that out, and then I will trim down my sentiment here. Okay, now I grabbed a piece of pattern paper from my stash. This is black and white striped pattern paper, and this is going to be the background for my window frame. This is going to be a shaker card today, so I thought it'd be fun to do a black and white card. Now, using my pencil, I'm going to trace around the open area because I'm going to do a little bit more heat embossing. So I'm going to grab some of the leaves that are, or the tree branches that are in the stamp set, and I'm just going to fill in that open area. I'm going to place that panel in my Mini Misty, and I shifted them, so I got to straighten them back out. And then I'm going to go over my stamps with some Versamark ink. And then I am going to use my white embossing powder and color in those tree branches. I thought that'd be a pretty background. I'm just going to go ahead and melt it. Okay. Kind of goes with my black and white theme here. And I think that's going to look really nice. Okay, so we need to add a piece of acetate. So just using my tape runner, I'm going to go around the back side of my fancy die frame here. Add my acetate, and then I did add foam tape behind there. Now in my stash I have some clear confetti sequins, so I added some to my shaker window there, and then I'm going to place my pattern paper right in the back. And I think that looks really neat. I like those extra branches in the back. Now this is going to go again on an A2 size card base. We're just going to place that right in the center, and you can see it leaves me a little bit of a white border. Now next I'm going to flip over my bicycle, add a little bit of tape, and attach that to my happy thought sentiment. And then I'm just going to angle the end of my sentiment there with my scissors. Now I did pop that up with some foam tape, and that's going to go on the very bottom of my card. Now, just to give it a little something more, I grabbed some black and white baker's twine from my stash, and I actually carefully lifted it up and tucked it underneath my panel and then tied a bow. And then that finishes off card number 7. Okay, now for card number 8, I cut out a panel here, just using some white cardstock. Now I wanted to use some washi tape again. This washi tape was so pretty, and I thought I'm going to go over my entire panel here at a diagonal, but I am going to leave a little bit of a gap in between the washi tape, and I wrapped all the ends behind it. Okay, now taking another piece of white cardstock, I'm using one of my stitch circle dies, and I'm going to cut out a half circle. And then I also cut out a half circle with some green cardstock that I had in my stash. Now I took a strip of white cardstock, and this is actually a Lawn Fawn scallop border die. And you can actually punch out those little holes in the bottom, but since they were all intact, I thought, well, I'm just going to leave them there. I thought it looked pretty nice. Now I'm going to attach my white half circle to my green. I just wanted a little bit of a green background. And then my scallop paper here is going to go towards the bottom of my panel. I'm just going to use my tape runner to adhere it down. The backside looks kind of pretty too. I was looking at that. Okay, now we need to stamp our sentiment. So the sentiment for this card is the one that says, "It's the little things that count." It's so pretty. I'm going to trim off my white half circle here, and then just using this as a guide, I'll ink up my sentiment with some VersaFine ink and stamp it towards the top of my scallop paper there. Now using my tape runner, I'll just adhere my half circle. Lovely. Now the stamp set for this month's kit, or last month's kit, came wrapped with some green ribbon, and so I'm just going to use that ribbon and tie a bow around the bottom of my sentiment area there. Okay, now for this card I decided to use the skeleton leaves. I have 3 left, but I'm going to use 2 of them, and these are very easy to color in with your Distress Oxide inks. So I wanted to bring in a little bit more of a green color, so I went over them with some peeled paint Distress Oxide ink, and then I did add a little bit of color with my seedless preserves. Now I'm just going to layer them on that half circle, and I think that looks really pretty. To glue them down, I'm going to use my multimedia mat, and I'm just going to go over the spine on those skeleton leaves. I did notice that when it hit my Distress Oxide ink, it really bled, so I had to be really careful. When I add this one, you'll be able to see how the oxide ink kind of smeared a little bit underneath. And I did go ahead and pop that panel up with foam tape and placed it on my card base. But that finishes off that card. Okay, now we're going to move along. Move along here to card number 9. This is actually the outline frame for the fancy die. I'm going to just cut out my oval here. Now we're going to do some more stamping. I wanted to create like a little scene. So I'm going to grab a few of the tree branches and place them towards the top and then to the right. And then there's also the little grassy border there. This wouldn't fit in my mini Misty, so I had to pull out my stamp platform. But I'm going to ink up those images with some VersaFine ink. And then I'm going to go in with the rest of my images. I chose the little girl, and I wanted her to be holding that little kite there. And then for my sentiment, I chose with brave wings she flies. I'm just again inking that up with VersaFine ink. And you'll see here that I couldn't get my kite unless I did it separately. But you can see my kite was, my girl wasn't holding the kite string. So I'm just taking a black marker and attaching them. And then I'm also, since I'm going to go over this with some clear embossing powder, I took my Versamarker pen and went over my inked up areas. I just used clear embossing powder and I went ahead and melted it. Now we're going to do a little bit of ink smishing. So I grabbed some worn lipstick and then some peacock feathers, and then also some fossilized amber. Now using just my spray bottle, I'm going to spray my oxide inks, and then just taking my little scene, I'm going to do a little bit of smushing. Okay, what I'm going to do is wipe everything down and add a little bit more color. So I added a little bit more worn lipstick and a little bit more fossilized amber. Lovely. Now I'm just going to use my heat gun and dry that. And I think that creates a real neat background. Now, for a little bit of shimmer, I decided to use my shimmer spritz. So I'm just shaking it up really good, and then I'm going to go over the top of my little scene with some shimmer. And then just for drying time purposes, I just use my heat gun. And so now my little scene has a lot of nice little shimmer. Okay, next I think that looks really pretty. Now I'm going to take my trimmer, my paper trimmer here, and I'm going to trim off the grassy area just at the edge, and then I'm going to trim down my circle. Now, hindsight, I would have moved my little gal over with the kite more over to the right, because I really like the little kite strings, and I hated to cut them off. But still, I think my scene looks really pretty. Now, for this panel, it is a cream colored panel that I had just cut out, and I popped up my little scene with foam tape and placed it on there. Next, I'm going to take this panel and place it on a cream colored card base. And then for bells and whistles, I'm going to go in with some iridescent sequins, just adding a few around my little scene. And that finishes off card number 9. I think that's really pretty. Now, for card number 10, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm taking some peeled paint, distress oxide ink, and going over some white cardstock. I'm not worried about blending or anything. I kind of like the two-tone look. And then in the dies, there are 2 leaf dies that don't have stamped images with them. So I'm going to cut out quite a few leaves using the oxide ink, and then also some gold mirror cardstock from my stash. Now I cut out a circle, and I wanted to create a little leaf wreath. So just attaching the bottom portion of my leaves to my circle. The circle is going to help me actually keep my wreath in a circle. But I'm alternating between the gold and then the green leaves, starting off with the larger leaves, and then I'll go over the top of that with the smaller leaves until I have a really pretty wreath. And again, just using my glue on the very bottom portion. And I think that looks nice. Now, we're going to flip this panel over, or this little wreath over, and I did add some foam tape behind it. Now, I cut out a panel with some white cardstock, and I wanted to do a little bit of embossing. Now, hindsight, I thought maybe I should have used a hot press watercolor cardstock. I think it would be really pretty. But I didn't. I just used regular white cardstock, and I just used an embossing folder that I had in my stash. But I'm going to place my wreath right in the upper center, and then this is going to go directly on a white card base. Now for my sentiment, we're going to stamp the sentiment that says "Thinking of You," and I'm just using my VersaFine ink. For this sentiment, I chose, I wanted to use some gold embossing pattern, so I don't mind going over my VersaFine with gold, because the gold will stand out. You won't even be able to tell that there's black underneath it. But I'm just going to melt my sentiment. Okay, I just blocked it off. Now next I have some gold twine that I have in my stash. Now this twine, I think I may have picked up at Walmart, but whenever I cut it, the ends frayed. So what I like to do is separate, almost like embroidery floss. You could separate the strands, so that's what I did here. And then I'm just looping them around the backside of my sentiment, and then when I run out of the gold thread, I trim it off right behind the sentiment, so you can't see the ends. So I did that a few times, and then I am going to add some foam tape behind my sentiment. And then I'm going to just peel off the backing of my foam tape, and then this is going to go right in the center of my wreath. And that finishes off card number 10. Very something different I thought you could do with your kid. But here's a quick look at the last part 2, cards 6 through 10, using the My Monthly Hero May 2018 card kit. I hope this gives you some more ideas on how to use your kit. I know there's so much inspiration out there, but I just wanted to do a few different cards. Thanks so much for stopping by, guys. I wish you a fantastic day, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.